I'm Demis Glasford. I'm a faculty over at John Jay College, and also I'm here in the social personality program as well. I'm also a former Dalmas Taylor fellow as well. So I'm going to briefly, already a little bit behind, so I'm just going to briefly talk about the day a little bit. When we talk about success, I think there's lots of reasons why any particular person might become successful, but 4 factors that might contribute to that. We've tried to frame the day around those 4 factors. And one you can think about is skills. You think about thinking about public policy and research. We tried to frame the day around specific policy skills that can benefit you in terms of wherever you want to go. The second one we think about what can help you in terms of your path is guidance. Lots of topics in terms of people talking today. If you're talking about race, prejudice, movement, health research, jury decision making, all these big broad topics that are absolutely great. We don't just have people who know about these topics. We have the people who literally wrote the book on these topics. Okay. So I would encourage all of you today to reach out in terms of thinking about not just hearing the talks, but really try to make a kind of personal connection if you can with some of the people here today. The third thing is that we can think about in terms of important to success is networking. You know, what's the old saying? It's not what you know, but who you know as well, something like that. It goes along those lines. So today when we talk about networking, I think you should think about not just in terms of all the wonderful people that we have here today in terms of networking with people who are more experienced, but also between yourselves. Look around you. These are going to be your colleagues, whether it be in academia or outside academia. These are going to be your colleagues. And so one of the things we're hoping that you can do today is try to create some networks for social support in terms of your own professional career. And then the last thing, something that I think is the most important in terms of success, is having a little bit of fun and having a little bit of food. So at the end of the night, we're going to have a little bit of food and we're going to have a little bit of fella in terms of the musical.
Welcome everybody, I'm Michelle Klein. I'm the faculty here and I'm the subprogram head of the social psychology program. I want to welcome you to the Graduate Center at CUNY, which is one of the last public options that's proud to be a public option. And I want to welcome you on behalf of SPICY. When this idea was brewed, Susan Apatow was president, Susan Dudley, executive director, Chris Woodside. So thank you all very much for making this possible. And so Tanisha Woods, who couldn't be here, who's in DC, Demis, Kendra and I cooked up an idea that it would just be wonderful to bring you all together to think through, as Demis said, issues of grants and skills and networks and fun, but also to reflect back on the really important history held in SPICY in particular for research for social justice that addresses questions of policy, both national policy and local policy. So I want to introduce some elders. No. In 1949, Francis Russell wrote in the pages of the Journal of Social Issues that social science should be the oil that lights democracy. It's an interesting challenge for us today, surrounded by an economic crisis that lays on top of already deep racial disparities. Tuesday night's announcement that we're going back to accelerate a war in, or finish, depending on the verb you prefer, in Afghanistan. Many of us are surrounded by schools that have taken high-stakes tests and test scores as measures of whether or not children deserve opportunities, and all of us are surrounded by a voracious criminal justice system willing to eat its young, and in communities of color, young and old. And yet we have people like Francis Russell reminding us that it is our work to be the oil that lights democracy. We have the memory of the Clarks inviting us to think about work that would help the nation imagine a different direction. We have the work of Horace Mann Bond. Anybody know Horace Mann Bond? See, it's so good that you came. Okay, Horace Mann Bond was a psychologist and an educator who was working in the 40s and the 50s. He is, by no coincidence, Julian Bond's dad. And he was a buddy with Thurgood Marshall, and when people were starting to use even the Clarks, standardized tests as measures of IQ, Horace Mann Bond walked around with posters and t-shirts that said, "Measure toilets, not IQ." And his point was, as he says, just go into homes. If they have 0 toilets, the kid's gonna have a low IQ. If they have 1 toilet, it'll be in the middle. If they have 3 toilets, they're gonna have a high IQ. High IQ tests are a proxy for social class. We can save our money. And then he went on to say that the federal government should subsidize toilets and not testing. I wish we had the likes of Horace Mann Bond with us today. Thurgood Marshall called him Mr. Toilets. So today is a day for fun, but it's also a day for conscience. It is a day for thinking through the history of psychology, particularly around issues of racial injustice, and where we will all place our bodies and our work. Okay? You've got lots of choices. You're all a talented group of young people. You've been invited here because of your promise, and so I will give you a little guilt because I'm Jewish, right? So you have promise, and the question is, what's your obligation? What's your obligation to the communities you live in, you work in, or you might feel accountable to? And I cannot imagine a better group of people to get us started this morning. To have James Jones, A.J. Franklin, and Kay Doe, who have been scholars with eminent careers and future careers that have dedicated themselves to thinking through a psychology of use, to borrow from Marge Piercy's poem, To Be of Use. The other day I was with some feminist and civil rights lawyers who were declaring victory because, let me get this right, they had just gotten it established that domestic violence will no longer be used as a pre-existing condition to exempt women from health care insurance. That's astonishing that that's a victory, that some insurance companies were using domestic violence as a pre-existing condition to deny women health care. The many places that we can imagine being of use, right? Who would have guessed that that would have been a place where feminist psychology was actually brought to bear, right? So the landscape is wide and the work is hard, and these days are not easy, which is why we're ending at the theater dancing. But as I said earlier, I can't imagine a better group to lead us off. We have invited Kay and AJ and James to help us think through both the past and the future, the work of professional organizations, the work of their own biographies, and the research that they've created, and the advice that they would give to you as scholars about to forge paths of conscience and meaning.